Okay, hello everyone. It is 1 o'clock on the button. I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar today. My name is Shannon Hooper, and I am the Business Development Executive throughout IDC for Southwestern Ontario. I actually have the extreme pleasure today of hosting this session with Beneva and my longtime colleague and friend, Chris Paterson. So today, Chris will actually be discussing the $1 trillion wealth transfer that we've all been discussing over the past few years. Chris is going to explore a multitude of factors that have affected the financial lives of your clients and Canadians over the past 3 decades. He's going to work to provide you with some simple, repeatable concepts that can help ensure your clients stay intact for the next generation. Because we all know that without an advisor or a plan, wealth transfers just simply do not happen. So with that, Chris, I'd like to hand over the stage to you to begin your presentation. It's lovely to have you today.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I know everybody has very busy days, especially in the summer when people are trying to balance helping clients along with spending a bit of time with family, getting away and enjoying beautiful weather and get out and about. And thanks to the IDC team for allowing me to join all you guys today. The idea behind this came a couple months ago when a friend of mine that runs an education company had said, "Hey, we've got a lot of advisors. We don't want to do the same old product stuff that most people do. Is there any trends you've been noticing over the last 5-10 years that you could talk to and build us something a little bit different?" And so as we started talking, we started realizing some of that I'd noticed maybe 8 to 10 years ago, that this $1 trillion wealth transfer we used to hear about 25, 30 years ago stopped being talked about, and it's being talked about again. And I'm not saying it did or didn't happen. I don't think anybody can actually quantify the amount of wealth that is actually transferred on an ongoing basis. It's a little bit too many moving balls to actually do. But we're starting to hear about massive wealth transfers. I saw an article in the States about 3-4 months ago talking about this like $73 trillion wealth transfer that was coming for the wealthiest. And we're starting to see mention of this again. And so the first time that I started hearing about $1 trillion wealth transfer was the late 90s, back when I was with a large green company, working different branches around the country. And it's exciting. It's cool. It's a big number. It's buzzwords all galore, and consultants go and talk to companies and dealers all about it. But it sure as heck didn't feel like it over the last 30 years. And so what I'm going to be talking about is the role that everybody plays in ensuring that whatever the wealth transfer plans are not affected by a whole bunch of things that I've seen over the last 25 to 35 years. Okay, so that's really what our goal is. And feel free to interrupt me as we go. The 30-second commercial on Beneva is really, who the heck is Beneva? Most of you have probably heard the name by now and have no idea who the heck we are. Because frankly, there was no real reason to know who Beneva was until the last few years. Beneva itself is the merger of SSQ and La Capitale, which were never big in English Canada. SSQ is a little bit bigger, really in the group and pension area in English Canada, but it's absolutely dominant in Quebec. We've got 3.5 million clients, 5,000 employees, over 25 billion in assets. We're the 6th largest insurer in Canada and the largest mutual company by a long shot in Canada. The big goal for the company over the next 5 to 10 years is to grow in the rest of Canada so people know what the heck a Beneva is, right? And I say it a bit tongue-in-cheek, what is a Beneva? But we're the largest company that you've really never heard of, right? But people will hear more and more of us through community involvement, sponsorship of things like Just for Laughs, CFL, things like that. So you will hear more and more of us. And as I like to tell people, as the largest mutual with the lower ROI targets, we tend to do a lot of things that other companies just frankly aren't willing to do built into the products. But we'll only touch on some product ideas in the last 10-15 minutes. Most of this is about ideas that help you regardless of what your top 3 or 4 or 5 companies are, regardless of your market. These trends touch everybody. And if you've ever seen myself or some of my colleagues speak before, you'll know that we often, again, tongue-in-cheek, say, I don't really care if you enjoy my webinar. I'm more concerned with whether you get good ideas that can help people in my webinar or my seminar or my chat one-on-one. So please take out your phones, your pens and papers, whatever you want to take notes on, and any client, any prospect, any C of I that you're aware of, especially people that are going to be seeing in the next 6 weeks. Scribble the names down if one of these ideas resonates with you, where it tweaks your brain and goes, oh, that reminds me of the Johnson family. Scribble them down, because if you can't write down 5 or 10 names in the next hour, either I haven't done my job or you haven't done your job. One of the two. And I'm going to do my best to do my side of the job. So please write down names of people that you can help. All right. So what is the opening story on this? 95 to 2005, especially late 90s, early 2000s. Everywhere I went, it seemed like every fourth fund manager or investment fund wholesaler presentation, they talked about $1 trillion wealth transfer. All this money's going to come. You got to be ready. You got to talk to people. By the way, I've got a 5-star Morningstar fund. You should sell it. It's awesome. It was the story, but there wasn't a lot of, like, we used to joke about how it's a great story, and then there's no actual link to the fund. But it'd be nice if they could tie that together a little bit better. So I'm going to try to actually tie these things together a little bit better today. And it was a really interesting story. Then we stopped hearing about it for a long time. And this was one of the other stories that I heard back in the late 90s. EGF was walking around talking about the compound interest of Elvis's. And I used to joke with head office when I was at this other large company that sometimes the projections they'd give us on profit and sales numbers we had to hit was really doing compound interest of Elvis's. Of if you just try to assume everything has a straight line, you're going to be wrong. There is no straight line in finance. There is no straight line in life. And sometimes I use this compound interest of Elvis's to illustrate the point that we should never assume things always go up in a straight line, because it's dumb, right? So the story AGF used to talk about from some other study they found was in 1977, you can see the number, 174 Elvis impersonators. It was projected to go up to 84,000 by 2010. And that means if you do that straight line and interpolate it straight, by 2050, 1 in 3 people on Earth will be an Elvis tribute artist. It's ridiculous, right? We should never assume things always move in a straight line. All right. But when this $1 trillion wealth transfer idea of is it real or not started to make me question it, was in 2016. You see this personal finance in the Globe. There's National Post in the financial section. There was this article about the $750 billion transfer, not the $1 trillion, the 750. And it got me thinking, like, hold on a second. 18 to 20 years ago, we were hearing about $1 trillion. Normally numbers go up, or at least mostly up, and it's gone down 25%. What the heck's going on? And it really got my brain going of what has happened since 1998 to have the number go down such a massive amount when normally things grow on a pretty regular basis. Even when it's choppy, it goes up on a long-term basis. And it got me really thinking at that time. So the analogy I thought of at the time was we were told it was going to be like a waterfall, but it sure didn't feel like that, because it got me thinking about the $1 trillion wealth transfer idea, where you feel like it's just this crush of money going down generations. And it sure didn't feel like that. There's certainly cases where it's like, wow, this family did really well. They're trying to make sure that the business transition, the wealth transition, the property transition, the cottage, whatever it might be, gets to the next generation the way that they want, effectively and efficiently. And sometimes there's little to nothing left as well. Now, I don't think the trickle on the right is accurate, but I don't think the waterfall on the left is accurate either. And I started to try to think, what the heck is the right analogy with water? Maybe it's a sprinkler, right? Where sometimes you're soaked, sometimes you're dry. It comes in bursts, but you've got to be ready, right? So clients without a plan, clients without advice, clients without an advisor will have less bursts and be less wet with that asset transition than others without a plan. I think we all know that, right? But when I first chatted about the idea of like what the heck happened, where did all the money go? We sort of sarcastically joked about, well, what did all the old people do with their money? Well, maybe they just started spending it because Matlock and Murder She Wrote went off the air. But reality was they could buy the DVD box sets. Honestly, that's not the cause, right? There was other causes, and some of you may remember the tech and telecom crash followed by the global financial crisis. They called it the lost decade. All the wealth that was uh, that had grown got crushed if you were in the market, right? So a lot of people uh, started to change their behaviors, right? When those things happen, as much as we all tell people to invest for the long term, what do people do? They buy with greed, they sell with fear. They get out at the as it's going down, they'd wait till it goes back up. A lot of people did not make any money for a good 10 to 12 years. Similar to the housing market through 87 and 92. A lot of people that I knew, it took them 20 years to get the value back to their house after the early 90s crush of the property market. And hopefully that doesn't happen to us again, right? So if people left the stock market, went to guaranteed bonds, GICs, whatever else it may be, um, what did they end up with? I think we've known for a long time that as much as interest rates have gone up a little bit in the last couple of years, we were sitting at 400-year lows in interest rates for a while there. 400-year lows, right? The lowest it's been in recorded financial history. And if you're going from a choppy stock market to a after-tax 1 to 2% GIC or bond, you're making less than no money. So people were more concerned in a lot of situations with keeping something rather than maybe losing something, losing significantly more, at least in their minds, right? So people would talk about interest rate bankruptcy. They can't afford to live on the capital anymore. They have to deplete the capital, right? So if the capital is being depleted by the stock market, or your capital is being depleted because interest rates can't keep pace with inflation and expenses, you're still depleting your capital in both scenarios. That's going to drive $1 trillion wealth transfer down to 750 on some level. Again, no one cause will ever do all of everything in life, but when you can stack 3, 4, 5 factors on top, it starts to have a pretty noticeable other thing. People live longer, right? And some of you that are on social media might have seen that meme on the left of, in '95. You may recall the Father of the Bride movie. They were supposed to be 45 years old. I'm well above that. I can tell you that. I'm older than Mr. Miyagi was in Karate Kid. I have been for a few years now, man. But um, people live longer, and people expect to enjoy more for a longer time than what they used to, right? That costs money, right? Additional factor. I think all of you, every person on this seminar, can probably name 5 people or more that got divorced somewhere between 55 to 70. What happens when you divorce? You end up with less than half of what you started with as a couple. Why? Lawyers, time, uh, difficult decisions to make. When you split assets, it's not just 50-50, it's 50-50 minus taxes sometimes, plus a whole bunch of lawyer fees, and things get locked up, right? So if both of you have less, you don't have the economies of scale of one mortgage, one heat bill, one gas bill, one property tax bill, it costs more to live, right? So a lot of gray divorce happens. It has always happened. I highly doubt that is taken account of in the assets will always go up. $1 trillion wealth transfer numbers. Some of that will actually get divided up, and people will have to eat up their capital. On top of that, retirement mortgages. You probably all know a whole bunch of people that retired, and whether it was because of a great divorce or whether it was because of we can finally get that house we always wanted in that place that we always wanted on the golf course, or they buy a second property. A lot of seniors retire with debt. Uh, Debt can be strategic and good, but it's still debt, right? So that means more cash flow to afford these things. And again, every one of these things that I'm talking about involves an insurance sale. If I go back a couple of slides, right? Have you lost money in the stock market? When I was at that other company, as soon as 2001 happened, people realized, oh, if I keep putting money into my power plan, or if I just use those 3 or 4% guaranteed rates inside that UL, I can actually make money. I don't need to shoot for 7, 8, 9. 3 or 4 tax sheltered or stable dividends. Those are good things. This can work, right? So people would change the way that they look at the products, right? So if you've lost capital, the easiest way to replace it to the next generation so that they can deplete the capital with freedom and still have a legacy, by insurance. Same with interest rates. You need to eat your capital. You still want to have an estate, buy some insurance. You're getting 2 or 3%. Why not do an insured annuity? Get the arbitrage between 2 actuarial tables and end up with 5, 6, 7, 8%, right? These concepts can, within the insurance industry, can really mitigate some of these things and sometimes reverse them, right? Same with longer life. The longer you live, the more assets you spend, you still need to have an estate, right? Same with gray divorce, right? You've split the assets. You're usually, um, in most separation and divorce agreements, a necessity to buy some insurance, cover off the support obligations, as well as now you've got, a new condo you bought, you've got mortgage insurance, you've got sometimes a second spouse that are younger, state equalization issues. Every one of these issues involves insurance. And you can see in the bottom corner of this slide a tiny little picture of a life insurance contract. That's my reminder for myself and for you. So back to that opportunities page, the third slide of my presentation. Scribble down the names of people that have gone through a divorce in the last 5 years that are older than 55. Scribble down names of people that have retirement mortgages, all of them. Put them down, okay? Or names of mortgage brokers, names of lawyers that do property work, lawyers that do estate work, lawyers that do marriage breakdown, family law, right? Next large expense that grinds down our assets, home care, facility care, long-term care, health costs, whatever we want to call these things. And one of the many things we learned through COVID times was it would be really, really nice to stay at home. But guess what? Staying at home is never free, especially when you need care to come in and help you. And if you want to have a professional stranger, a PSW, a nurse, somebody come in and help you, rather than having your son-in-law help you with a bath, or your daughter or son help you with a bath and clean up and do these things, wouldn't it be nice if you had the money, right? So insurance products can be there. Tapping into cash values can be there. Whether it's long-term care, CI, loss of independence benefits, extreme disability benefits, things like this. There's a whole bunch of insurance-related solutions that can help clients live with dignity and have the cash flow in order to do the things that they want to with their family, rather than have their family care for them. That family will always care for you, but it would be nice to have a stranger do some of the more unpleasant things, that you can actually just spend time being together, right? As well, if any of you live anywhere in Canada, but especially the major centers, it's a really difficult scenario to try to have somebody under 35 or 40 go buy a home and actually be able to afford it. What is it? What's it cost to? How much income do you need in any major center to actually qualify for a reasonable mortgage for a place with 3 bedrooms? You need hundreds of thousands of dollars of income generally, 200,000 plus, if not more, right? So what are people doing? Mom and dad, grandparents, aunts, uncles, they're offering assistance, whether that is some of the proceeds when they downsize their home from 4 or 5 bedroom to 2, or move down to the 3 bedroom townhouse from the large 3 bedroom house with lots of land. People are giving some of the house sale money. People are going and tapping into their home equity. They're using some of the retirement assets they have to help the kids actually afford to buy a home, because they don't think there'll be ever any chance for them if they don't get some assistance, right? Again, that's use of capital. It's a good thing to do. Many people do it. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a use of capital that didn't exist nearly on the same level 25 years ago. Insurance can be a way to replace some of those assets, possibly for the other kid that didn't need the home assistance, home purchase assistance, or to replace the assets to the surviving spouse. Okay. As well, estate delays. It used to be that, when I was training people on financial planning software 25 years ago, people would say, hey, we should just use Canada life expectancy, 78 for a male, 80 for females. And I always used to have to remind them, life expectancy just means half the people are dead. The other half are still alive, right? So, for that person, that died at 58, somebody lived to 88 or 90 or 98 to even that thing out in the middle, right? People often forget this stuff, right? But there's more and more people over age 90. I'm dealing with a case right now where we're trying to do some things for the mom who's 93, and she's still doing pretty well. So the the client that I'm working with the advisor is 72. He's just got $1 million from her, but it's an early inheritance. She still has another $5 million. She's doing great. And we're looking at doing a back-to-back and insured annuity on him because the rates are like 7+ that we could give him. He wishes that mom could have done that years ago, but nobody showed it to her. But the estate now that he's looking at for his own planning isn't to help his kids that are 42 to 52. It's to help the grandkids. So any more money that he gets from mom, he's trying to skip generations. He doesn't need it anymore. It used to be that people would expect to get an inheritance between 50 to 65 as they're retiring, but people are receiving inheritances well into their retirement when they don't really need the money anymore. They've done okay. It's more of a top up, and it's more a matter of, how do we get this to the next generations that actually need this stuff, right? So the dynamics have changed. So again, insurance products are all over the place on this stuff. Okay. But regardless of what's changed, what is the same? And these stats are I don't care if you go to StatsCan, if you go to LIMRA, if you go to any media outlet that does a survey, it's always been like this. 50% of people or more don't have a will. And you can say the same thing for business owners. Over 50% of business owners have an up-to-date shareholders agreement. And even if it is, it's probably not funded, right? So anybody with a will or an equivalent of a will, like a shareholders agreement, they need updating, right? And the liabilities usually aren't funded anyway, whether it's personal or corporate. The amount of people with insurance coverage I've never seen in my career be more than 70 to 75%, but most of those or a lot of those are group. The percentage of people with actual individual life insurance coverage has always ranged between 41 to 47% every time I've ever seen a survey. And as much as certain surveys will say 25 to 35% of all people have CI, it's completely untrue. If you look at the LIMRA stats on the number of critical illness policies in force in Canada, it's about 1.4 million. You don't need to be an actuary to know that with 38 million people, even though you've got some people that can't qualify because they're too old to buy it, over 90% of people that could qualify don't have any CI. Back in, when was it, 2008, 2009, there was about 900,000 life, or not life, CI policies. So in 15 years, 500,000 policies have gotten on the books, with 100,000 being sold every year. The number of CI policies that sold is always between 90 to 110,000. It has not changed much at all in the last 20 years. What does that say? It says, sure, claims have happened, but a lot has gone off the books as well. Maybe they weren't sold the right way, or people didn't understand the value they had. But when there's only less than 1.5 million policies on the books of CI, it's a massive, massive opportunity that still too many advisors aren't helping their clients understand the importance of. When 50% of men, 40% of women will have a claim by 75. Those are simply the only stats we need to know. Doesn't matter what all the underlying of everything else is. Flip a coin, and if you were wrong, you had a claim. So still, way too many people, when something happens, they're dipping into their savings, they're dipping into their home equity, they're selling assets, they're doing things to afford to get through difficult choices when they're diagnosed. They're making less money when they go back to work because they're not working 70 hours a week anymore, right? So the needs have not changed. The number of people that want advice really has not changed. It has not changed much at all. People still want to go to the internet for information, but they want a human to give them the advice, right? And the other thing that has not changed, as much as a lot of people say, "Oh, all the generations are different." The boomers, the Gen Ys, the millennials, and then they often forget Gen X's like me, but we tend to get ignored in most of those surveys. But I don't. Again, it's very Gen X to say don't really care if I'm missed on it, but the idealism of youth has never changed, right? And every year at Christmas, when I watch It's a Wonderful Life and I see George Bailey go through his path of life of, I want to change the world, I want to travel, get out of the small town, you old guys don't get it, like Mr. Potter. That's literally the same mentality that every generation has always had. So if you're an advisor and you're hearing consultants and buzzword people say, you got to change the way you talk to people. You really don't. You just have to ask questions. Honestly, just ask questions. Every older person was thinking these same things when they were younger. Every younger person is thinking these same things. Everybody would love to make the world a better place. Everybody would love to experience good things in life. and everybody would love to help others, right? That is, and if they aren't, then they're generally the Sith. But um, you can connect with multiple generations. You just have to ask and listen and be interested in what they're saying, right? And one of the things that I'd read a long time ago, I've got an English lit degree. Um, Kurt Vonnegut's one of my favorite authors, and I read this at age 21 when young Gen X, early 90s, thinking all the old guys just don't get it. The same thing everybody does. But this was Kurt Vonnegut, who was in World War II, was a POW in Dresden when he went over to fight in the war. Um, he had a kid who was a hippie, and in one of his books, he wrote that every generation thinks their parents had it easier. Every generation thinks their kids don't work hard enough, or at least not like they did. I read this when I was 21. I was like, oh, huh. I guess we're not that unique, right? So everybody has these same issues. Everybody has the same mentalities. So you have the ability to connect with older people. You have the ability to connect with younger people. And engaging the multiple generations has always been the one thing that I've enjoyed about this industry and other colleagues that I've seen present from other companies over the years, where they've said, you can do it. You just have to sit down and chat with them, right? But how do you go do it? And a friend of mine that I used to work with at another company, Phil Galvin out in Calgary, really good dude. He was really great at advisor training. And he used to talk about when he was an advisor, he would get up at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., whatever it is, and he'd treat himself like an employee. And he'd say, what do I have to do to be the best employee I can be today? And he'd get out and he'd go do his thing. And I talk about putting on the business costume because I know in the world of Zoom, I'm sitting in my house right now in a nice chair. It's summer. My kids are downstairs doing whatever they're doing. But years ago, I met an advisor downtown Toronto who said, every day I get up, I put on my business clothes. I walk down the street, the coffee shop that I enjoy. Uh, I read the paper. I connect with some people. Maybe I get a referral. I go back and I start my day. So even if you work from home, have a trigger. I've got my trigger. Other people have their triggers. Have a trigger that gets you engaged in the brain and in the activity and in the energy to be that great employee for yourself. And at the end of the day, Phil used to say, he'd ask himself, am I ecstatic or disappointed with my employee? Should they get promoted? Should I fire them? Right. So as a self-employed person, that's the sort of mindset that we need to do to go help people. Right? And Dale Conger, my guy, I used to work with Manulife. He's in Montreal. Really good guy, one of the best marketing minds I've ever worked with. He used to talk about, you don't need everybody to do business with you. It'd be nice, but let's be realistic. Don't waste your time with everybody. You just need to get the prospects into the now pile, the later pile, or the never pile. A quick and early no is way better than a really long maybe that turns into a no, right? So put your prospects into the now pile, the later pile, and the never pile, right? And one of the ways that I think a lot of people are very effective at this now is by using social media. And you'll see a lot of social media consultants go out there and say, you've got to be on, you got to do this. And they kind of overcomplicate it. I use an app that used to be called Grapevine 6. It's a Toronto-based company, but they got bought by this other company. The thing I like about it is I can go into the app, and when I'm going to see an advisor, go to a meeting out of the office, from there 10 minutes early, I can pull out the app. It creates different news feeds of different types of articles. So it'll be things like, music, travel, sports, things I like personally, but then a whole bunch of business related things on behavioral science and finance and insurance and whatever. I can pick out an article or two in a 1 minute scan. This article looks interesting. I quickly read it. If it looks cool, like I want to post on LinkedIn, I can then add a time, a date, and write down a sentence that says, interesting article on retirement and a couple of interesting points were this and this. Post. And then it'll post that day, whatever the day is that I say. If I find 3 articles in those 10 minutes, I can have my social media thing set for that whole week. 3 different days, 3 different times. It took me 10 minutes. You don't have to spend hours a day on social media to post stuff. The one thing I would say though is whatever you post, whatever you do, for Christ's sake, just follow up, please. Just please follow up. There's too many times that people post stuff. There's a lot of engagement and then they do nothing. A friend of mine, Keith, he's got a marketing consulting company, and he did a LinkedIn campaign for somebody who was an investment focused advisor. They also did some insurance. And she wanted a really specific demographic with, age and professionals, self-employed, things like this. They customized a engagement process over a month to put specific posts at specific times that would be most resonating with those types of people. After a month, she had something like 468 different, not views and likes, I mean like reposts and comments, like where people actually took time to do something. So after the month, he said, "Hey, looks like it went really well. You're probably doing pretty well with all this. If you're too busy to do more, we can scale this thing back, but would you like to do another campaign? Because like that's a lot of really good engagement." He said, "Well, nobody bought anything." I said, "Well, it takes time. Like you might need a couple of meetings to, ask them the questions. And like he knows the business. He knows you sit down, you ask questions, you develop a plan, and it takes some time to get it implemented." But she said, "Well, no, but nobody bought anything." He said, "But how many people have you met with?" She said, "Well, I haven't met with anybody." He said, "Well, how many people did you follow up?" You had 468 people that commented and shared, not just liked it or looked at it. They actually spent time typing, "Hey, that was a great article." And he said, "How many people did you actually follow up with?" And she said, "What do you mean?" Right? So the entire point in your business of social media, other than make sure people can find you and see you, is to help with that Dale Congram filter. This thing, right? If you've got your traditional list of your 20 key people you're trying to get together with in the next month, but you've got number 104 on your list, you're not sure if or when they'll be ready, and they've posted your thing, they've commented on your thing. "Wow, Shannon, that was an amazing article on that stuff. I never looked at it like that." Doesn't that sound like somebody that says, "Hey, Shannon, please call me. That was awesome." Right? Number 103 on your list could be number 4 now. Right? So use social media as that prospect filter. Okay. Right. And many of you have probably heard the phrase "be interesting rather than be interested." I had the good fortune about 20 years ago of going to a function where Jim Collins was actually speaking to a well, it was good size but relatively small Canadian company, and I was a guest of somebody there, and so I got to see one of the industry icons, business leadership, talk, and he talked about his story of how this phrase came about. So he was a Stanford grad doing consulting, and um, he went back to his mentor at Stanford, saying, "My business has plateaued. I feel like I should be doing way better, and I'm not sure why I can't break through." So he said, "Oh, Jim, tell me your process. What do you do? How do you work with your clients?" So he started talking about the amazing process and how great he is at stuff, and all these things. And his mentor paused him. He said, "Hold on a second, Jim. It sounds like you're spending your time trying to be interesting rather than be interested. Think about the people, Jim, that have been the most influential and impactful on your life. Is it because they were interesting or because they were interested?" Right? So Jim, as he was telling the story, I was like, "Oh my gosh, that sounds like the best advisors." Like the people that I've met in my life, whether it's Art Schooley years ago or other people, or Bill Anderson, the people that have the biggest impact on my career are the ones that were interested in the other person, right? And it made me then look at all the advisors I've seen over the years, um, that have been so good with their clients. They're the ones that put the client first. They're the ones that when I see them in a meeting, when I go with them, they're all about the client, and they're hearing every little word and catching every little nuance of body language, right? So again, in this process of engaging with the generations, the process of determining who the next person is you're going to see to talk about, you know, so many people, whether it's Jim Root or other people, say it all the time: ask a question and close your mouth, and then truly listen to what they're saying, right? Right. So what are the consistencies and inconsistencies, right? Well, the consistencies are really that change is a constant. People always care for others. If you put others first, it's going to work out well. Everybody wants to strive for more, and people need flexibility, right? So, on the conceptual standpoint, from some of these, um, from some of these trends that we've talked about of life changes very quickly, uh, what are some of the concepts and ideas that we can use to help people as we filter through this prospect list? Well, one of the cool ideas that we've been doing for the last couple of years at Beneva since I got there, something we call cashback term, right? So if you think of normal people that are 25 to 40, they've got some income replacement and a mortgage, and this is actually based on a live case, but you meet a couple, they're 40-ish, they need a couple $1 million of term, and they've got reasonable cash flow, so you're looking to lock it in closer to or not life expectancy, but retirement. So you show them T25, right? For 250 a year, they can lock in $2 million because they're pretty young. It's a great idea. It's simple, easy to do, right? But we've got a very unique UL that can go down to $25,000 of base and then put virtually every other thing that we have. You can put CI and all the term riders, everything you want on it. So we can recreate term for the same amount of money, but because there's a tiny base of UL, and we actually do guarantee the existence of a 1% account in contract for the life of the contract. 1% doesn't sound like a lot, but most contracts have zero in it, right? But we can now create this tiny little base cash value that, again, it's not going to make you rich, but if COVID 46 happens or the person loses their job, if cash gets tight, the person on the right, for the same amount of money they would have spent on normal term insurance, has some lapse protection. It might be for 3 months, it might be for a year, but they're able to maintain their coverage if cash flow becomes tight. And if everything worked out well, they have a few $1,000s left at the end of the day, right? So when life changes and you're trying to differentiate yourself and show people, look, I don't just give you the same bland vanilla stuff that the other guys do, and you can give them for literally the same amount of money, something that has some lapse protection with some cash. And lo and behold, when we show people this and they say, oh, so that's how life insurance works. I can put extra money in it and it doesn't actually cost me any more than the other one. Like it's literally the same. I always thought this cash value stuff cost 2 to 3 to 10 times more. No, you can actually get it started for the same amount of money. We've had a bunch of client cases where people said, can I do that, but put in an extra $1,500 a month now? And the answer is yes, you can. You can, right? So this can lead to bigger estate planning opportunities too. Take the same sort of client, but now they're a little bit older. Okay, and make it a few years older, 45 years old. And this was another case that I'd worked on. An advisor called me and had said, you got a female, somebody else showed her $1,500,000 of T20, 100,000 of CI with ROP to 65, and it cost $350 a month. And he showed me what the contract was, showed me what the other company was, and I said, well, it's actually a pretty good CI plan. It's actually a pretty good term plan. They actually do have the wording in their term that allows you to convert to anything that's permanent down the road, which doesn't sound unique, but it actually is. There's a lot of the companies don't have that wording anymore. They limit, or they will determine what your conversion plan is going to be down the road, rather than just have the words anything that we offer in the future, right? So I said it's actually pretty good. But the advisor had said, is there anything we can do with this whole cashback term thing that you guys do? So we built the same thing with a base of UL, put on a CI to 70 rider because we don't have a 65 rider. We saved them money, $20 a month, and gave them guaranteed cash value. And at the end of the day, they're still getting, um, you know, they could put in the same amount of money, right, and have a little bit more cash value, but they're getting the same amount of coverage. We're extending the CI by a decade, and we're giving them lapse protection along with basically a conversion credit when they're older, right? So when they're 65 and they're starting to think, well, how much life insurance should we keep? We're probably not going to keep the full $1,500,000, but how much should we keep? You've got a few $1,000s there. And again, it's only a few thousand, but it's $3,000 more than anybody else is offering, right? So again, flexibility, uh, custom design for people, right? And ensuring that we're getting them the most that they possibly can for the least amount of money, right? Here's another live case. And again, this is a slightly older, but it's a real case that many of you will identify with. The couple is no kids. They're more concerned with maximizing their lifestyle while they're together. And she still expects to live another 10, 20 years, but she has a health issue that has her probably rated, maybe uninsurable, but probably rated based on what they told us. But they were just looking at doing something with their term policies. The advisor wanted to say, look, they're doing really well. He's an executive at a large company. They've got lots of money, but they just want to make sure that if something happens to either of them, they get some money. So can we take these two term policies instead of converting them both, just go joint first to die because we'll save money, right? And we all know joint first to die is cheaper than two term policies. And usually this is the talk that people have done for the last 30 years on joint. you save a few percent if it's term, maybe 3 to 5%, or maybe it's 10 or 20% for permanent. What a deal! And if you both die in a certain time frame, sometimes you get double the death benefit, and then the survivor, whoever lives whoever lives after the first person passes away can buy more coverage. Most companies have some sorts of clause like this. But again, you're not saving a heck of a lot of money, right? I've always, whenever I've looked at it, it's made zero sense to go with this plan on term if I'm saving 3% or something, when I can just deliver a claim check and say, the stuff that you had, Jane, now that John is gone, um, yours stays at the original age that you bought it. We don't have to do any paperwork. Here's your claim check. I'm going to drop off some dinner for you tomorrow. Right? You don't have to deal with the, oh, hurry, we got to get some paperwork done in the next month type chat. Right? The clauses that I put in here are our own joint wording. Again, like we've got pretty good wording on it, but I still think you're better off going single life. Let me show you why. So in this case, we looked at single life, and we did use UL with a fully guaranteed. Sorry, we didn't do fully guaranteed. We had 3% on this one, but we looked at what would it cost to get $250,000. If we go with joint, it's about $8,000. If we do two plans of $250,000, it was about 10 grand. So it's 23% savings to go joint versus the other. Right. And again, they don't have kids. They don't care about second death. So some of these benefits, they don't really care about that much. But I said to the advisor, look, if I'm looking at something and I only save 23% of the money to get half the benefit, somebody won here and it wasn't me as the client. Right. And as much as I work for Beneva, if I see something where the company gets bigger share than what the client does, I look at it and go, there's got to be a different solution that can work for everybody, where the company still makes money, but the client wins, right? So I looked at what if instead, because they did plan on overfunding this thing so that they have access to another tax shelter. But what if we overfund it? And so the advisor wanted to fund it at this level anyway. And I said, hey, let's just put in enough to keep this thing funded for a period of time. And how long do you think she'll live? He says, probably 20 years. Earliest would be 10 to 15, but she'll probably live 20, maybe 25. So I said, what if we take the same amount of money they were going to spend anyway? We get two policies, 250 each. And at the end of 20 years, because they've already paid it up in 10 years anyway at 3%, we should be able to get 3%, right? She's going to end up with basically equal to the amount of money she's put into the policy, right? So the cash value is equal to the amount that they put in. They've got a paid up policy. They've got a tax shelter. They could put in more if they want, but we're trying to compare value, right? If he or she dies, so $250,000 is paid out, or slightly more if it's phase plus. They have what they wanted to start with, but they were out of pocket an extra 120, 140,000, depending on which one of them we're looking at, out of pocket for that. They could then donate that policy to any charity or create their own family foundation. With could be the London Community Foundation where Shannon lives, or something else, right? But they're going to get a charitable tax receipt for that amount and get basically $60,000 back. Now, chances are, because they're older and it's a paid up policy and there could be a health issue, they might actually get a charitable valuation higher than that. If it's 160 or 180, now they're getting, $90,000 back, right? If they just cashed it in and there was zero ACB left, they're still netting the same amount of money, but now we've got a bit more upside, right? So what we showed them was, look, you can spend the same amount of money and actually have more benefits. You still get your life insurance policy and you get a bunch of money back. Why wouldn't we do it this way? And now, if the couple enjoyed mountain biking at the local park or whatever, they could now name the local park after them, right? So looking at other ways to not just sell the usual thing is one of the things that we're always trying to do. And here's a way that we can now create a social legacy for somebody. Every $250,000 added up can start to pick away at that $1 trillion wealth transfer that sometimes feels like it's not happening, right? And what about slightly older, right? So we all know capital gains has just gone up, and the number of budget changes and capital gains tax changes that have happened in the last 29 years that I've seen, and it's constant, right? But we all know what the reasons for buying life insurance at the older ages are. It's liquidity, taxable payments, other things like that, right? And one of the most overlooked product designs in the marketplace is something that the US calls uh, guaranteed variable life, which basically is this. Okay. Now, the problem is one of the best products we had 25 years ago was crazy cheap T100 or long level cost of insurance. Problem with it, as a colleague in the US division at an old company I used to work with would always say, is what happens to that T100 or LCOI thing if you don't have cash value? Grandma misses a premium at the age of 87, cognitive loss, or just banking change. What happens if she misses a premium for 6 weeks? Policy lapses, right? It was a great low cost policy to get maximum death benefit, but not a lot of flexibility. And he positioned it with me. He said, what if they had a cash value, a client controlled reserve, instead of the reserve that's embedded sitting on a spreadsheet somewhere or a server that the actuaries get to look at the company? What if the client controlled that reserve? She had lapse protection. She had the ability to make it go paid up or take premium holidays and access some of the money. Wouldn't that be better? Like, well, yeah. How do you do that? He says, well, we do what we call guaranteed variable life. It's literally what you guys have in Canada. It's yearly cost with a fully guaranteed interest rate. So this is an actual case I worked on about a year and a half ago, where the lowest cost term to 100 plan was $100,000. Our cost on a fully guaranteed basis was $83,000. You end up as a client with exactly the same thing, a premium you pay and $2 million paid out if you die. The big difference is the client controls that reserve inside the policy. And you can see it, mid to late 80s, she's got $500,000 to $600,000 of reserve. If she's told that she's terminal, we can turn off the tap of the premiums going in and use that reserve. The policy still is going to pay out $2 million, but now she can divert the $82,000 a year to professional care to live with some dignity, right? So the pricing on YRT versus level has changed a lot in the last 20 years. And now, in a lot of situations, building a YRT like a T100 is not just the same price sometimes, like I always wished it had been 20 years ago, but it wasn't. Then the numbers didn't work. Now, a lot of times it's cheaper. And for the last 2 years, we've been doing 2.5, we've been doing a ton of insured annuities. And this is an actual case on an insured annuity. And I won't go through every last detail, but again, an insured annuity is really just the idea where if I have a bond or GIC where I want to live off the interest but maintain the capital to the next generation, let's do some math, right? So on the left side, and again, this is January 2022, interest rates went up. And at the time, the advisor had said, well, GICs are 2.5. Let's assume we can get 3 long term. So you can see after tax at a 43% tax rate, she'd have 17 grand. But if we bought a guaranteed, and again, we used our product, YRT, with a fully guaranteed interest rate, level death benefit, and then bought annuities from another insurer that paid the highest guaranteed income, we ended up with $75,000 of cash flow, $4,000 of taxable income. And after buying the insurance, we ended up with $37,000. Okay. That's over double what she would have had with a GIC or bond. And again, this is before interest rates went up. So I've seen some other companies present in the last 6 to 8 months saying, hey, insured annuities work again because interest rates went up. That has nothing to do with it. Insured annuities work because you have mortality pricing, where you're playing, frankly, 2 insurance companies off each other. One with good mortality on the life insurance, one with high mortality on the annuity, so that they give you a lot of cash flow and not a lot of tax flow. So you want lots of cash, not a lot of taxable portion. And you're basically getting arbitrage off 2 actuarial tables. And that's why this thing works. It only partially has to do with interest rates. When the interest rates went up, the annuity payments went up, but so did the taxable portion. And we're not seeing much difference really in what the net rates return. You can see, 6.5% to 8%, depending on her equivalent marginal tax rate. So we're doing lots of these. And here's a smaller one that I worked on about 4 months ago. But we have a female 69. You can see the disclosure, the details below, but 43% tax rate. And we're able to give her, if she had a GIC or bond, which would pay long-term 4.5, which she wouldn't be able to get that long-term, but for 1 year she could. She ends up with $6,400. If we just do a normal back-to-back, we buy life insurance, buy a fully guaranteed zero guarantee annuity. She gets $9,400, right? But this woman was single. She said, I don't care about my estate. I just want good cash flow and I care about my community. I want to give some money to the hospital. So we said, what if you get more money today, but you donate your policy, make the charity the owner, they'll give you a charitable tax credit for your premium. That's a $3,200 premium. And so the math goes up, right? So we had a $7,500 premium. She gets a charitable tax credit for that. The extra cash flow she gets another $3,200. So the total amount that she gets, including OAS refund, is $13,000 for an equivalent 9.4% rate of return. Right? We want to talk about enhancing net estates and transferring wealth to either our loved ones or our community to create social good. Here's an amazing way to not just show people, look, you actually can have your cake and eat it too here, right? She's getting way more cash flow and she can make a really big impact on her community. Okay. Last one I'll show you is on the corporate side. Oh, actually, I've got one extra one here, right? So back to back or insured annuities inside the corporate scenario. So trap money, corporate surplus inside of a holdco. Once you do RDTOH, CDA credits, all the other stuff, you usually end up with similar or slightly better cash flow with the insurance solution versus a GIC or bond. But the biggest reason you do it is the estate. 50 to 70% more money because of the CDA credits. If you try to liquidate cash out of a company, it's going to generate a ton of tax, right? So we all know that. This was a live case, and you can see what the net estate increase is. Okay, last one, live case over the last few months. Okay, female 78. The advisor first looked at an IFA. She said, I don't want complexity or debt. I just want something simple, and help me get less tax in my estate, help the hospital, and get the rest of the money to my kids. Right. So what we did is without going into all the detail, wasting freeze, donating fixed value shares from the estate freeze over to the hospital, use insurance out the CDA, and redeem all the shares back. So that's basically what, right. The initial look at this was a basically $500,000 premium with a par product with another company. And the advisor said, okay, here's what we're looking at. Pretty good. It grows pretty well. Not bad, eh? I was like, yeah, it's pretty good. He said, can you do anything with yours? I know you guys are really good at older ages. Your UL is really good. CDA credits are great. How's it compare? Right. So we can see at current dividend scale, the net estate after CDA and taxable benefit for the ACB portion is about $9.5 million if she lives to 98. More realistically, you're looking at something in the middle between the $5 to $9 million, right? But I always like to look at current -1 because of the nature of how par works. It's good. I own a par plan. I own a UL plan as well. I like them both. But when they can change the price of the paid up additions, but maintain the dividend interest rate, I'd rather be conservative and go less than current, just so that I'm comfortable, right? But whether it's current or current -1, they're both good. It grows, right? However, take a look at what we could do for the same amount of money. $500,000 buys a $10 million death benefit, and the net estate is basically $10 million. The CDA credits were significantly better right out of the gates. The net estate is way higher, and even up to age 98, the par plan, even at current, didn't catch up. So we look good there, right? The other factor is because we're using this stripped down US model of YRT with a guaranteed interest rate, there's not a ton of cash in there, which means there's not a lot of cash driving share value. These are not a lot of share value driving extra capital gains and complexity on postmortem tax. So we checked off a whole ton of boxes here. Value for money, immediate bump up of estate, immediate bump up of CDA, great net estate, and less tax complications on share value driven by cash value. Okay. And some people, whenever we do this, because again, I'm doing this sort of rapid fire, they'll say, well, that almost seems too good to be true. Why is CDA so good on UL? The quick version is just understanding ACB is premiums paid minus NCPI deduction. It's more than that, but that's basically it. And the NCPI deduction is really based on what's the net amount at risk to the company. So if you've got $1 million of death benefit, period, no cash value. NCPI is based on $1 million. If you have a $500,000 of cash value on a $1 million death benefit, and there's only a $500,000 net at risk to the company, you only get NCPI deductions on the extra $500,000, right? So that's basically how NCPI works. So if you've got less risk, you've got less NCPI. And with most par plans, you have cash value equalizing out to death benefit at age of 100 or 105, which means you've got lower and lower and lower net amount at risk, which means lower NCPI. So if you're paying for a long time, then UL is going to look really good. If you're looking at somebody who's 35 or 40 and they're paying at a compressed level, everything equalizes anyway. But at these older ages, the CDA and UL can look really, really good. Okay. So with that said, and I'm right on time, got 1 minute left, right? With this whole idea of the $1 trillion wealth transfer, it's never felt like a waterfall. Maybe it happened. I don't know. All I can tell you is it didn't feel like it. But I know I had a lot of cases I worked on over the years where there was a lot of money that we help people plan for. But sometimes it comes in drips. Sometimes it feels like a waterfall, but it's never on a static basis. It just keeps coming on a straight line. But static recommendations based on one-time calculations really mean nothing. We all know that there's no straight lines in finance. There's no straight lines in life, and things move and twist and turn and bounce all over the place. And if clients don't have you and they don't have your planning and you helping them all along the way, their portion of that $1 trillion wealth transfer is not going to happen. They need the plan, they need the coaching, they need the ongoing support from all of you. And you need to get out there and help them as much as you possibly can with the most flexible solutions you possibly can. With that, I'm going to pass it back to Shannon.
Thank you so much, Chris. I have pages of notes, so thank you very much. It was excellent. Are there any questions from the audience? If so, feel free to pop them into the chat box now, and we will have Chris answer them. It is 1 minute to 2, so if anybody needs to pop off the meeting, please feel free. I do believe that there is still a poll coming for anybody in Quebec. However, if there's any questions, please feel free to pop them in. I will tell you some of my takeaways from your session, Chris, because like I said, I've taken a whole bunch of notes here. But I think the poll is up. So if you are a Quebec licensed advisor, please feel free to answer the poll questions now. But I will tell you that I think the most valuable thing that an advisor can be when working with their clients is adaptable. You've just given us a multitude of different solutions for everyday problems that we have with clients. And I think without knowing them and hearing real life examples like what you have provided, sometimes you can forget about different concepts. Like an insured annuity is something that we've talked about for years and years and years, but seeing it in your presentation puts a lot of practicality to it. So thank you for that. I also think that it's really important to remember Chris's point about using social media as a filter for your prospects. I think that's too often we overlook the benefit of social media and how we are using it. So bear in mind that Chris gave a great example of a client that, had 463, was it? Prospects.
Easy.
Yeah. And how sad to not reach out to those people, right? That was an easy pool of opportunity. So something to consider. Also, is it more beneficial to be interesting or is it more beneficial to be interested? As advisors, we have to remember that active listening in our client meetings is probably the number one thing that we can do, as well as being adaptable. If we can't hear what our clients are saying, then we're never going to build the right plan for them. I have a whole bunch of more notes about differentiating yourself and making sure that you build in different plans. And I think your cashback term is a great way that you can differentiate yourself as an advisor. So if anybody ever comes across a situation where you'd like an illustration or you'd like some more information on how we can achieve that with Beneva, just let us know and we'd be happy to run those scenarios for you. But with that, there are not any questions. There's a bunch of thank yous in the chat box. But if, Chris, you want to stay on for another minute, we'll let everybody else go because it is 2 o'clock. But if anybody wants to hang on for another second and ask a question in the chat box, you're welcome to do so.
Yeah, sure. Back to the cashback terms. It made me think of an advisor I had lunch with yesterday who was rated with another company 150% on his own buy sell within his small GA for his buy sell, right? So when he first learned of the idea about 2 years ago, he's like, oh my gosh, man, I'm rated 150, 2 million. Here's my thing. Here's my issue. What do you think? I bounced it off our underwriter. He's like, yeah, we'd probably come in 150, maybe standard, but even if we're 150, we're going to waive it down to standard because we waive all ratings 200% and below, 870 and below, 2 million and below. So we looked at term and then we did cashback term on them for for the same amount of money that he was spending with them. We could have guaranteed like $35,000 fully guaranteed with cash because we were saving him so much money. He was already 2 years older,
Yeah.
right? But as it was, we saved him money, and he was guaranteed $9,000 at the end of 20 years with the
Incredible.
cashback term idea, and we got him standard rates 2 years older than he had been.
Yeah, that's
That guy
incredible.
has done a ton since.
Yeah.
Like every
I,
single situation where it's term 20 or longer, he's like, Patterson, I got another one for you. Right? Let's see if the numbers work. Right. So
Amazing. And I think you just said something that is one of the things that we offer or we say to advisors the most when it comes to Beneva is your undisclosed, non-marketed
yeah,
table rating.
we will never put a PDF out on it
Yeah.
ever.
But I will tell you, so for anybody who's hanging out on the call here, what Chris alluded to is Beneva is fantastic for looking at clients, anybody who would have had up to 150% rating on a policy. Obviously, all health needs to be in order other than whatever that 150 rating is. They will actually potentially could get standard from the underwriters at Beneva. So it's a great opportunity for your clients that may have routine health issues, maybe high blood pressure or cholesterol or things like that, that would tend to earn them that 150 rating. In most cases, you can get a standard rate offer from Beneva. So
Yeah,
something
but there's
definitely to
the
consider.
other thing to it too, and again, it's 200% below. But
Yeah,
but even if you've had that rating and it's waived down to standard, we'll still give you our simple CI offer. Now it's only 3 illness, $20,000, but there's actually an IDC off advisor in the GTA that's been a long time friend of mine. Where when he heard about the offer, he's like, "So I'm rated. Would you waive me? Because like I can't get more insurance because I've got this rating." I was like, "We might, but we might even offer you some CI." He's like, "I can't even qualify for CI." Seriously? So he got his policy redone with us. He had a 175 because it was 200% or less. We waived it down to standard, and we offered him CI, which he'd previously been told by others that he could never qualify due to a heart issue. So
amazing.
that's the other twist to it. As long as you're standard, even if it's a waived down to standard, we'll still give you an offer for CI with no extra medical questions.
Not to mention your built-in ability to increase your coverage on some of your life policies as well. So
Totally.
amazing. Thank you very much, Chris. There are no additional questions in the chat box here. So we will leave it at that for today.
Great.
We look forward to seeing everybody at our next session. Thank you again, Chris, and we appreciate everybody's time today.
Thanks
Thanks,
very much.
everyone.
All right. See you
Have
later.
a great day.